Welcome to the WPL Book Drop Podcast. I'm your host, Becky Miller, Circulation and Marketing Assistant at Waterloo Public Library. I am so excited to welcome two great guests to the podcast. Joining us today is Haley, Library Assistant at Waterloo Public Library. Haley listens to instrumental music when she needs to calm herself down or relax. Did you listen before you came here?
Probably, yeah.
She believes all soup leftovers should be stored in round containers, never square ones.
Yep. Soup is a round food. It needs to be in a round container.
I can get behind that.
Thank you.
And when she was in elementary school, she put together a 20-page report on the Loch Ness Monster. Just for fun, it wasn't a school assignment. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think I was reading Harry Potter at the time, so I was really into like magic and mythical creatures, so I really got into the Loch Ness Monster.
Can you share anything that you remember about the Loch Ness Monster?
No. All of the things that I found were the same really edited pictures and like from one website that probably is not credible, so I don't think I should share any untrue information.
Thank you for that, but I'm so glad you were able to come up with 20 pages of untrue information. That's great. Welcome, Haley.
Thank you.
And then also joining us today is Holly, Library Assistant at Waterloo Public Library. For 5 years now, Holly has been on a mission to bake the perfect chocolate croissant and has come close twice. That's amazing.
No, it's time for the third time.
Yes, you should do it and then bring it here. Holly likes to create picture books for her children, but she will show no one else because her illustrations are so bad.
Horrible.
What kind of illustrations are we talking about here?
Your basic stick figures. Every once in a while I go to YouTube and find like a dragon, but
This is good stuff.
it is.
Holly made her first $1 at the age of 4 when she charged neighborhood kids to see her new baby sister.
My mom made me give the money back.
And listeners, you'll be happy to know that I did do an inflation calculator on this. That's like $2.50 in today's money. She was making money.
For a 4-year-old, that's big time.
Right, it's kind of like making your sister like a circus act, but that's okay. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you.
Haley, since this is your second time joining the podcast, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
And Holly, since this is your first time joining the podcast, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the Waterloo Public Library?
Sure. I mostly work in circulation, helping patrons find materials, check out, recommending titles. I also help switch out the first floor displays, and I co-host Bookaholics with Dusty, where we read a variety of newer nonfiction and fiction titles, and that book club meets virtually on the second Monday of every month.
Awesome. The reason that we have you both on the podcast today is because the two of you are planning a new book club called Coffee and the Classics. What can you tell us about Coffee and the Classics, Haley?
It's a new book club we'll be hosting here in person in the second floor conference room. It'll be every third Wednesday of the month, and that's starting May 18th, so we still have a little bit to go. It'll be 10:30 to 11:30 a.m., and the first book we'll be reading is Emma by Jane Austen.
All right. So I want to ask you, Holly, how did the two of you come up with the idea for this book club?
Well, it actually started with Haley and I talking a lot about the classical books we used to like. We both like Jane Austen, and we talked about like the Bronte sisters books. She graduated college a little more recently than I did, so it's been kind of fun to have her here and talk about some of those. But it made me want to reread a lot of the classics, so I asked her if she was interested in doing a book club focused solely on the classics, and she said yes. So, we thought we'd throw in coffee because coffee makes everything better. And even though most of the classics we'll choose for the book club were published a long time ago, there's a lot of universal themes that are still relevant today.
Awesome. And then can you tell me some of the other titles that you have selected?
Let's see. So Emma's the first one. We have A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And what's the third?
Candide.
Candide by Voltaire is that. But yeah. We haven't really planned, but we'll probably do at some point all of the Austen books. Yeah, we'll make our rounds on all of them.
Awesome. So if people want to know how to find out more information about this book club, where should they go?
We have it posted on Facebook. We have it posted on our other social media platforms. We have it on our library calendar now.
That's our website?
That's our website, yes. And they could also email me, which my email address is posted on all of the posts that are out there. So
I
can give them more information.
Excellent. We will put your email address in the episode description. If anybody wants to reach out, has questions about the book club, go ahead and contact Haley. She is your point person. Before we wrap up, can you believe it? We're already wrapping up. Let's take some time to spotlight some books you each read recently. What can you recommend for our listeners? Let's start with you, Haley.
So the first one I have is The Power by Naomi Alderman. It's a science fiction novel, and it's about women developing this rare power to release electrical jolts out of their fingertips. And no one knows where the power is coming from. It's developing in like the teenage years. And obviously some women are using it for good. They're opening up schools to try to harness the power and help these young girls, and some of them are using it for evil.
Yes.
And revenge. So yeah, it gives me Handmaid's Tale vibes, kind of, but more modern, which was really cool. And since it is International Women's Day, I thought I'd recommend it. It's a really good read.
So it's March 8th today. Mm-hmm. So this episode will be released later in the future. So you can think of this moment as in the past. Then you brought another book for us.
Speaking of The Handmaid's Tale, it's The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. It came out in 2019, so I was really excited because I read The Handmaid's Tale in high school and I loved it. So this takes place 15 years after the events of The Handmaid's Tale, and there are 3 different points of view, which is different from the first book. There's a character from the original book that's one of the points of view, and then there's 2 new characters, one of which was raised in Gilead, which is the theocratic regime from the first book, and the other one was raised in Canada. And if you've read The Handmaid's Tale, you know that Canada is one of the main people trying to fight Gilead, I guess.
So it's a country where there's still freedoms, and that's where people go for refuge.
Sorry, Canada's free, yes. So the book is about the 2 new characters' fight to try to overthrow Gilead, and then the secret help of the original character I mentioned before.
And what's your verdict on that?
Overall, I loved it. I think it's maybe because I loved The Handmaid's Tale so much, I might be biased. I thought that the use of multiple points of view worked really well for this particular story. I'm still on the fence about how different the portrayal of the original character is so different in the Testaments compared to The Handmaid's Tale, and I know a lot of people who have read both agree with me, but it's still really good.
Thanks for not spoiling that part.
I never spoil.
I have read that one. I did enjoy it as well, but I also thought, like, how could they make this character this way in this book when the other way in the other book they were completely different? So yeah. Did you watch the TV show at all?
I watched the first season and liked it a lot because it followed the book really well, I thought. And then when they started to stray away from where the first book ended, I tried to keep up, but it just kept getting darker.
It's very dark.
And I couldn't keep up.
Yeah, it'll make you a little sick to your stomach kind of thing. All right, and then Holly, you've got some titles that you want to talk about today.
I do, and I'm going to share 2 that I gave 5 stars on Goodreads, which I don't give those very easily. But the first one is The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, and it's a multi-layered novel. It can be kind of hard to follow, just because it's based in 2 different time periods, the 1970s and the early 2000s, in 2 different places: Cyprus, which is a Mediterranean island, and London. And Cyprus is inhabited by Greeks and Turks, and there's a lot of animosity between the 2 different peoples, and then eventually the island is torn apart by all their conflicts. and it specifically focuses on two people who fall in love in the 70s when they're teenagers, but then they can't be together. It's kind of a Romeo and Juliet thing. They can't be together just because one's a Turk and one's a Greek.
This is historical fiction?
There's some it's loosely based on, this war, but it's fiction.
There was a real war then?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know my history so well, especially world history,
No.
so I'm outing myself here.
Yes, I didn't know that either, but it follows this couple, throughout their lives, and it kind of focuses on the long-term damage that war can have on relationships. Their daughter is a big part of the book as well, and how even though she wasn't directly involved in this conflict, how it still has, it's crossed like generational lines there. So I loved this book because I thought it was just beautifully written, but it also gives a really powerful perspective of the long-term effects that like culture wars and migration can have, and the human tragedies that are involved.
Yeah, it sounds like a timely read.
It went really fast. It was good.
Good.
I highly recommend it. And the other book, anybody who knows me knows I love any books about witches, especially like the Salem witch trials. And so this one is Hour of the Witch by Chris Bohjalian, and it takes place in Boston in 1662. A woman named Mary has married a much older man, like older than her father, and he's abusive to her in private, but very, very good man out in the public's eye. She tries to divorce him after he tests to see if she's a witch by sticking a fork in her hand, and she bleeds, so he determines since she bled, she's not a witch. But, as she goes through the trial, like the divorce proceedings are not like they are now. So at some point she is told that she's a witch, and she's put on trial for that. Like many strong women were back then. So I don't want to spoil any endings, but it's really good. And again, loosely based on history. And I love this book because it has a lot of twists, and it goes pretty deeply into the socially sanctioned brutalities that women experienced back then when they were trying to divorce their spouse. But anyway, yeah, it was very fascinating and disturbing at the same time.
Ooh,
which
I love
makes
it.
a really good book.
Yeah, it does. Okay, well, I want to thank you both for joining the WPL Book Drop podcast. It's really been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to leave a rating and subscribe. Thank you.